back and say, okay, I can see this working. It's a risk, but I can see it working.
Yes, we absolutely visualized it. And it was a struggle, actually, to come to that decision because, to your point, I think some people were not comfortable taking that big of a risk. And we really had to negotiate as an organization with our team and with our board. And where we ended up is that we knew that the problem that we had to solve was much bigger than what we could accomplish in New England alone. And we knew that eventually we had to go national anyway in order to really touch how big the problem was for kids not having access to active play. So in the end, it was our long-term vision of knowing that someday we were going to be there anyway. We were just going to take that leap a lot earlier than we expected.
Excellent. So have you thought of adding a sixth or a seventh, or is it really just, again, I think it's, as you wrote in your article, this applies to any type of business. This is really, it's common sense to write, but when you put it in the context you did of these are the actual struggles, the day-to-day, it's pretty helpful. But are there any that didn't make the list, but you tend to still lean on them once in a while?
Well, I think probably things that I think about now more than I probably did when I wrote that is really around people. So as we've grown, we've added a lot more staff to our organization, a lot more board members and advisory board members and young professionals board members. And so as our network has grown and the people involved has grown, skills and areas of relationship building, I guess is a good way to put it, have become increasingly important to the organization. Things that used to be easy when we were 3 or 4 people and we huddled around a table and made a decision now involve many, many, many people and have impacts on a lot of people's lives and their workloads and their interest. And so I think we spend a lot more time now as we scale making sure that the people that are involved in good sports, whether they're staff or volunteers or board members, that they see the quality, the high level of engagement, the strategic nature of the way we make decisions. We want all of that to be transparent and visible to our team, both internal and external, so that they feel good about being a part of this organization. Excellent.
And as you mentioned, you're at how many millions so far to date of equipment have you put in the hands of young athletes who need it?
26 million so far.
26 million. And do you have any numbers on where you're averaging, in the last few years on an average annual basis?
Last year in 2017, we donated about $5.5 million worth of equipment. And this year, we are projecting that we will be well north of that. At the moment, my projections are somewhere in the $7 to $8 million range.
Wow. So, to your last couple points here, what is the vision? What do you see in the next 5 years good sports being able to accomplish? No pressure.
No pressure at all. The way that we're looking at it right now as an organization is we're trying to dig deeper into the data that's out there about kids' participation and access to play and how that relates to poverty. And what we're trying to figure out is what would it take to truly solve the problem? Like how big do we need to be to make sure that cost, especially in the area of equipment, is not a barrier to kids' participation. So when we figure out what that number is, then I think we'll know what our end game looks like.
Well, and we can start talking about that now on the state of pay to play, because like you say, if you've got the cash moving, one of your biggest values may be in looking at the systemic problem. So let's talk about that. And I'd like you to open up with you. One of your posts you talked about. Remember it like it was yesterday when you were in the 7th grade, hearing about the high school track team. Let's tell that story, and I guess your recollection of pay to play becoming just a thing. The first time recognizing that it existed.
Sure. So I was in 7th grade, and I had always played sports. I had been playing sports since my dad put a little league hat on my head when I was 4 years old, and I loved sports. In fact, I have never met a sport I don't like. They were doing tryouts for the high school track team when I was a 7th grader, and so I was like, "Why not? I can run. I'll try it." And so I ended up going to tryouts, and I expected to be a sprinter. I liked to run fast. I used to race my brother in the yard all the time. What I ended up doing was trying out, and the coach asked me to try the hurdles. And I was like, sure. And so I did. And it was particularly funny because I'm all of 5'1", so me doing the hurdles is kind of ridiculous. But I liked it. And so I got good at it, and I practiced all the time. But when I joined the team, they needed a hurdler, and that's where my opportunity was, so that's what I took. But when I joined the team, nobody asked me if I could afford the fee, if I had track shoes, if I could buy a uniform. Like, the only question they asked me was, do you want to play? And that's not how it is today. I've got 4 kids of my own who all play sports, and every activity that they do, whether it's a school activity or an after-school activity or a team sport or a town sport, there is a fee. Everything from, $50 for a morning extra gym or an after-school running program, all the way to thousands of dollars for kids to play club sports and elite sports and travel sports. And that is an enormous barrier for kids' participation in sports. Kids from high poverty communities, their families don't have the resources to be able to pay those fees. And they also don't have the resources for their kids to show up with all their own gear. And so what was possible for me as a kid is no longer possible for millions of kids across the country. And that's really the problem that we're trying to solve, because sports and active play have huge benefits for kids' development. It's not something that should be reserved for kids who can afford it.
Well, and I know talking with some people at the Aspen Institute, they've found that the types of places that a lot of the kids in the urban areas, in the low-income areas, 2 of the most popular sports are very high facility cost. Because, and my thought was, it seemed like it was an awful safe location, which is a lot of boys and young men are liking swimming, and a lot of the girls and young women are finding gymnastics. So they're moving away from the outside facilities, which, again, they're open, they're uncontrolled. But again, how do you find gymnastic and swimming? That's, other than probably ice hockey, that's about as worse as it gets, for facilities. And I had a daughter go through gymnastics, and that's pretty high rent, and the same with swimming as well. So it is really crucial. It's not just about shoes and balls and things like that. There's a lot changing right now in this situation. So you talk about this, not only its exposure, but it even limits the type of player that can, even if they have the money, or should have enough money to play typical sports, it limits their access and ability to get to these. Can you give some examples?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just kids trying and being a part of different sports and recreational activities is super important. Most kids, through their PE program or their after-school program, that's a lot of times where they get exposed to different types of sport and physical activities. That's where they learn about how they can move their bodies, what they're good at, what they struggle with. It's really physical literacy, the same way that you learn how to read. You learn all sorts of things about how to move through PE class and recess and after-school programs. And if those programs have been cut or their budgets have been really decimated, what has happened is kids are getting less and less exposure to different types of activity. And that means they lose confidence. They don't feel like they can play that sport. So when they're exposed to it later on as an opportunity, they don't play. It also hurts them in ways that are not really related to physical activity, right? They don't have ways to easily connect with friends. Moving your body builds your brain, so it even hurts kids academically to not get exposed to as many sports and physical activities. And what we're finding is that in schools, the physical education budgets are so small that they're trying to keep large class sizes occupied with less and less equipment. $764 is the average budget for a PE program in the United States. And if you can imagine trying to keep, 30, 40, 50 kids a class all day, every day, for 180 school days, busy with $764 worth of product, that's near impossible.
Yeah, I was about to cut you off and say you meant, per grade or something like that, or something, because
I wish I did.
Yeah, I mean, because you could spend $764 keeping one team properly, coached, occupied, equipped over 9 months. That's really, that's only that's $4 a day at that point. Wow.
Yeah. And instead, a PE teacher is dealing with that for a whole year to have all the equipment they need for their class. And that means that, midway through the year, they have half as many balls because they've deflated or they've gotten lost or they never had any goals, and the cones that they did use for goals are now broken. And, they're just, it compromises the quality of the program that teacher is able to offer. A simple example is, take a sport like soccer. If a PE teacher has enough soccer balls, then a lot of kids can be playing and practicing at the same time, rather than most of them waiting in line for their turn. And we had a case like this recently where a program wrote to us after we made a donation to them, and they told us about a kid who was kind of self-conscious, not comfortable in PE class, really struggled to participate and often would sort of hang back and not really be a part of the class because of it. And when we gave them more soccer balls, the PE teacher said it was like a totally different kid, because he was doing the drill with his own ball and felt like nobody was bothering to look at him because they were all playing with their own ball. And suddenly that kid lost that self-consciousness that they were struggling with and became a part of the class and really got better at the sport, which gave them confidence to try other things.
Yeah.
And it seems simple, but a ball makes a big difference.
Oh, it really does. And I've been fortunate to be in programs that are not cash-strapped, but that really is the thing. You've got, they all want to be occupied. They don't want to be watching. They don't want to be waiting. But let me ask you this also. I was thinking about this when you mentioned if you're a PE teacher trying to deal with, again, $4 a day for every day, all those classes of kids, do you think it's forcing a lot of turnover, even if there was an endless supply of talented PE teachers coming, they're graduating every year. And as one said, now I've got to really find a better situation. This is too frustrating. I need to find, a well-funded